I went to Veruela to see Fermín. I found him in the monastery church, alone, sitting in the front pew, staring at the altar with the concentration of someone going over a score before a concert. He had papers on his lap, the text of the reconciliation rite, handwritten, with annotations in the margins. "Fermín, you can't do it." He did not turn. He went on looking at the altar. "Give me a reason." I gave him all of them. I told him about Pilar, about Inigo, about the dead who walk through Trasmoz without casting a shadow. I told him about the Nemeton and the Celtiberians, about the spiritual void, about the dead as insulation. I told him about the Moncayo, the warm stone, the shiver, what sleeps beneath. Fermín listened. He nodded at the right moments. He did not interrupt. When I finished, he removed his glasses, cleaned them with the hem of his cassock, put them back on, and looked at me with the infinite patience of a man who has heard arguments all his life. "Vega, you're a writer. You have a beautiful imagination. Truly, what you're telling me has all the ingredients of a bestseller. But I am a priest. And what you describe, dead who stay, mountains that sleep, warm stones, are legends. The same legends that have kept this village in superstition for 800 years. Exactly the legends you came to dismantle. Things have changed since I arrived." "What has changed?" "That you've felt things you can't explain." "Vega, I feel things I can't explain every time I pray. It's called faith. It's not called evidence." "It isn't faith, Fermín. It's what?" I did not have a word. I could not say evidence because I had no quantifiable data. I could not say intuition because that was exactly what I had spent 10 years combating. I could not say faith because I had never had any. "It's certainty," I said. "I don't know how I got it, but I have it." Fermín stood. He placed a hand on my shoulder. With the same delicacy as Pilar's dead husband, but with the warmth of someone who still has a body. "My sister has been dead for 20 years in a village the church cursed. 20 years without rest. If there is a chance the rite will free her, I am going to do it. Not for theology. For Clara." He went to prepare the ceremony. And I sat on in the church of the monastery of Veruela, looking at the altar where 800 years of monks had prayed to keep the Moncayo asleep, thinking that the compassion of a brother could do more harm than all the malice in the world. The 1st of November. All Saints' Day. Dusk. The light of souls begins at 7 in the evening, when the sun has gone and darkness falls over Trasmoz like a blanket laid with care. The women of the village dress in black, strict black, head to foot, like a mourning that lasts the whole night. The children dress in white. The men do not take part in the procession, they stand in the doorways of their houses, in silence, watching. On every threshold, a carved pumpkin with a candle inside. The pumpkins of Trasmoz are not the pumpkins of Halloween, they do not have smiling faces. They have abstract, geometric shapes that the candlelight turns into shadows dancing on the stone walls. Pilar explained to me that the shapes represent the village dead, each pumpkin is someone. The procession begins at the church. The women file out, candles in hand. The children walk between them, barefoot on the cold stone. And they begin to sing. The gozos para las animas benditas, the praises for the blessed souls. A hymn that Pilar recovered from the memory of her mother, who had learned it from hers, who had learned it from hers. A monotonous melody, unadorned, without harmonies, a single line of female voice that rises and falls like a breath. The words are an old Castilian, half Aragonese, asking the souls to rest, not to suffer, to know that the living remember them. I walked with the procession. Pilar had given me a candle and a black shawl without asking if I wanted to take part. In Trasmoz, on the night of the 1st of November, everyone takes part. And then I began to see what I should have seen from the start. Among the women in black, there were faces I did not recognize. Women I had not seen in the bar, in the square, in any of the walks I had taken through the village over 2 weeks. Women of every age, young, old, my age. They walked with the same solemnity as the rest. They sang the same hymn. They carried the same candles. But they left no footprints in the mud. And their candles did not drip wax. The dead women of Trasmoz were processing with the living. It was the one night of the year when they walked together, in the same direction, singing the same song. It was not a containment ritual. It was a family reunion. I looked at Pilar. Pilar was walking beside someone I could not see. She had her hand extended to the left, as if being led by the arm. And she was smiling. Pilar, who never smiled, who wore the permanent expression of someone peeling potatoes, was smiling with a sweetness that took 30 years off her face. Trasmoz, her husband, walking with her in the light of the souls. The procession was passing the church when the bells began to ring. Not the bells of the church of Trasmoz. Veruela's bells. 3 kilometres away, in the valley, the monastery bells were tolling with the measured cadence of a solemn rite. Fermín had begun. Pilar stopped. The singing stopped. The entire procession froze like a photograph. "No," said Pilar. A single syllable. But she said it with her whole body. I ran to the church. The door was open. Inside, on the altar, the parish crucifix, a Christ of dark wood, 17th century, with closed eyes and an open mouth in a gesture that had always seemed to me like pain and now seemed like alarm. Over the crucifix, a black veil. Old. Of a velvet that crumbled to the touch. The same veil, the same, that an abbot had placed in 1511 while reciting Psalm 108. It was on the floor. No one had removed it. There was no one in the church. But the veil was on the floor, crumpled at the foot of the altar, as if the cloth had lost the will to stay in place. What had been holding it, the spiritual force of the curse, the inertia of 500 years, had loosened enough for gravity to do the rest. Fermín was reciting at Veruela. And here, in Trasmoz, the seal was answering. When the veil touched the floor, the church filled with voices. Not screams. Not howling. Not the horror cinema teaches you to expect when the dead speak. Whispers. Hundreds of simultaneous whispers, overlapping, like a library where everyone is reading aloud at the same time. Some were praying. I recognized fragments of the Hail Mary in Old Castilian. Others were talking, names, questions, stray sentences. A woman was singing a lullaby. A man was laughing. 770 years of accumulated voice, releasing all at once. I grabbed the nearest pew. My legs were shaking. Not from fear, from volume. Not of sound, but of presence. The entire church was full, truly full, full like a stadium, like a town square on a feast day, like a market on a Saturday morning. Only I could not see anyone. The ground shook. Not as it had in the beech forest, not a shiver. A crack. Deep, long, like the sound of a ship breaking apart. Dust fell from the ceiling. A thin fissure ran along the wall of the apse like a frozen bolt of lightning. Outside, every candle in the procession went out at once. Without wind. The bells of Veruela kept tolling. And with each stroke, the whispers grew fainter. Not quieter, more distant. The voices were receding. Each bell stroke was one more step toward the door Fermín was opening. Pilar entered the church. She was 84 years old and she walked as if she were 20. She went straight to the altar. She picked up the black veil from the floor. She spread it with both hands. And before placing it back over the crucifix, she turned to the church full of invisible voices and said, "No, not yet. Stay." She did not say it in Castilian. She said it in something older. An ancient Aragonese, guttural, with open vowels, the same I had heard in the recordings from the streets. The language of the dead of Trasmoz, the language of those who never left. And she added, in Castilian, her voice breaking, "Trasmoz, please, stay." The voices hesitated. I felt them hesitate, a wavering in the presence, like the tide when it does not know whether to rise or fall. Some were leaving. Inigo, outside, was shouting names at the empty streets like a shepherd calling sheep escaping downhill. The most recent dead, the closest to passage, the ones who had been there the least time, the ones who still remembered what it felt like to want to go, were moving toward the door Fermín had opened. And then the women of the procession entered the church. The living and the dead. Together. And they began to sing. Not the gozos. Something older. Something that was in no hymnal, that no priest had written, that no chapter had approved. A melody Pilar had taught them, and that Pilar's mother had taught her, and that her mother's mother had learned from hers. 3 notes that rose and fell like a breath. A lullaby. So old that no one knew where it came from. Perhaps from the Nemeton. Perhaps from before. The same melody that mothers sing to children who will not sleep. The same one the living sing to the dead who will not go. Stay. You are from here. Stay. The dead stopped. Those who were leaving halted. And they chose. They chose the stone. The cold. The streets they knew. The houses where they had lived and where they went on living without a body. They chose Trasmoz. Not because they were trapped. Because it was their village. Because belonging does not end when the pulse does. The tremor stopped. The voices fell silent. The candles of the procession lit again, or someone lit them. Someone without a shadow. The bells of Veruela stopped tolling. The silence that followed was the most complete I had heard in Trasmoz. I knew, do not ask me how, that 3 kilometers away, in an empty church, Fermín was on his knees. That he had understood. That his sister did not need to be saved. That she needed to be left in peace. Pilar placed the black veil over the crucifix. With care. With reverence. The way you tuck in someone who is sleeping. She looked at me. Her eyes were dry. Her hands steady. The face of a woman who has spent her whole life preparing for a moment like this. Now write your book, she said. I left the church. The procession continued as if nothing had happened, the women walking toward the cemetery, the children barefoot, the pumpkins on the thresholds. The same procession Trasmoz had celebrated every 1st of November for centuries. The only difference was that this time, among the footprints in the mud, there were empty spaces where the footsteps of those who have no weight should have been. Inigo was sitting on the wall at the entrance to the village. He was looking at the streets with an expression I had never seen on him, relief. Are they all there? I asked. All of them. Some nearly left. But they came back. Why? Inigo shrugged. As if the answer were obvious. As if it did not need saying. It's their village.